Welcome everyone. It is a pleasure to have you all for today's webinar on heritage and creative economy. The webinar is a part of the Ripples Festival organized by banglanatok.com in association with British Council India to promote creative enterprises. Just to give some background, this is a 3 days festival celebrating traditional art and artists of art forms like Baul, Katha craft, and Shola from the villages around Shantiniketan. It also features a fascinating theatrical tribute to Shakespeare by theater groups and traditional folk dancers of Raibeshe in Tepantor, a theater village. In fact, the opening happened in Tepantor yesterday with a webinar on heritage and festivals and also a unique production of The Tempest. The on-ground festival is also being hosted online on social media. To introduce ourselves, banglanatok.com is a 20 years old social enterprise working with a mission to foster inclusive and pro-poor growth. Our flagship program is called Art for Life, which works towards building and strengthening rural creative enterprises led by the community themselves across India. In our approach, we revitalize the traditional art, we empower the artists, the traditional artists, with resources and skills, and then we transform their villages into active rural hubs and cultural tourism destinations. The Ripples Festival is celebrating some of these active hubs in and around Shantiniketan for cultural tourism destinations. In Bengal, we work with 25,000 traditional artists covering 30 different art and craft forms. And today we have 20 active cultural hubs where the artists have undertaken their traditional art as their full-time profession. Today's topic is linking heritage with creative economy. And in fact, 2021 is also the International Year of Creative Economy for Sustainable Development. We find that creative economy is becoming increasingly important for equitable growth and community well-being. Interestingly, globalization and technological advancement, easy access and communication has had major impacts on traditional creative industries. On one hand, the fast-changing digital world has made it extremely difficult for the traditional artists to present and to cope with the changing contexts for their art and craft forms, and also to deal with modern and contemporary demands. On the other hand, the globally interconnected world has made it much easier to interact and learn across borders, reach out to new audiences, and participate in intercultural exchanges and become a part of the international creative community. With British Council, we have a long history of such multicultural collaborations for promoting creative economy. And in today's webinar, we have a panel of international speakers. Alongside, we also have two artists from the Katha and the Baul villages who will also come in to share about their life story and demonstrate their art and craft form. So without further delay, I would like to start our session by introducing our first speaker, Jonathan Kennedy. Jonathan Kennedy is the Director of Arts India at British Council. He develops national strategy and conceptualizes programs to promote and strengthen India-UK cultural relations through collaboration, connections, and creative partnerships. His specialization and vast experience is in the field of arts management, international cultural exchange, and theater producing. Yesterday, we heard you, Jonathan, at the opening, and I was just sharing that it was absolutely wonderful to listen to you and also to understand your passion for art and theater. So I would like to invite you to speak with a question. We wanted to know your thoughts on creative economy, especially in the present day situation, and how British Council is addressing it. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Madhura. Pleasure to be here again for the second day of the Ripples Festival, and I'm very sorry once again, as I've seen the festival progress over the last day, not to be with you on the ground, but stuck here in my apartment here in Delhi. But there we are, such are the times that we live through. And that is partly, I guess, as an opening gambit to your question regarding what is the British Council doing around the wider theme of heritage and the creative economy, especially in the past year, when we have retained our programs in festivals and crafts in particular, and have expanded a new program that we've been rolling out across India in heritage later this year. But all of our activity has gone online. We've done a couple of face-to-face events, but they've been very small. And in the main, we've been bringing artists together in similar capacities to perform as part of festivals, but mostly all online. And that's the way we're all now living and experiencing the arts, I guess. That's kind of the precursor to, as we look to the future, what might this future look like? When we're all kind of in our atomized worlds, basing ourselves in our homes, but actually also looking for creative stimulation and a way for artists to continue to make work. So the fact that you're bringing together online, live, face-to-face, and artists performing online, but also in their villages is really fantastic to see. That innovation across digital and live is, I think, new, and I expect going to be the future for how we look at what we've learned from the past year and how we look to the longer term future. Which is not to say that it's in any way as satisfying as being there on the ground with you, which we all know feels like a kind of second-hand solution, but still, here we are. And if I think about what the impact of COVID-19 has been and the work that British Council has done in the past 9 months in terms of research, we've partnered with FICCI, the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, and the Artex company based out in Mumbai. And we've been effectively measuring the impact of the pandemic on the creative sectors that we broadly call the creative economy here in India. And looking at what that has meant in the early days of lockdown, which in India, for those who aren't in India, was in March until June. And then we did our first edition of the report, which is called Taking the Temperature. And that was released in July. And then we released a second edition just before Christmas, which then looked at the response of the sector from July through until early November. And that was looking at the kind of period immediately after lockdown had relaxed to see what has been the impact on activity and that wide understanding of what we mean by the creative economy, which if we look at from a perspective from the UK, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport has bifurcated the sector into different areas: advertising, broadcast, performing arts, film, radio and television, digital arts, festivals. So we've taken a similar model and adapted it to ensure that the context of India also relates in terms of how we can look at the research. And over the 2 cycles of the research, nearly 800 organizations and individuals have completed the survey, which takes a good half an hour to complete. And then we then back that up with lots of secondary research from the sector, from interviews, as case studies, what has the government and state governments done, what has business done, what has the sector done to sustain itself over the past 8-9 months, and reported back on all of that information. And the survey was available in English, but also in Hindi, in Bangla, and Tamil. So many, I think in 6 languages, except for English, to ensure we could reach out as far as we could across the country to ensure we could engage with many artists to actually participate and share their insights of what's happened. And the most recent report tells quite a worrying story. I'll just kind of give you some of the headlines of what we've learned from it so far, and some of the changes that have come about from the first edition of the report. I could share my screen, but I don't think that's available to me, so I won't. I'll just give you some headlines on the scale and impact across arts companies, artists, managers, and stakeholders. And that the research compares the developments of change over the period from March to November last year. And we'll be doing a third edition of the survey and the report over these next few months. And then we'll release that in April. So then we'll have a full financial year record of what's been the impact of the pandemic here in India. And the second report also makes some recommendations for what the future could look like and what interventions would support the sector over the next few months. The key findings from the first report is 88% of the creative economy in India are MSMEs, micro, small, and mid-sized enterprises. And the creative economy sits within the formal and the informal economy, which is quite different from the UK, where it sits broadly in the formal economy. In the first 3 months of lockdown, 41% of the sector had stopped functioning altogether and had closed down. And 61% of the sector that had been established within the 4 to 10 months was expecting to lose almost half of its income in that period alone. So some astonishing findings just from those early reports. And the second report shows a kind of deepening narrative and also a clearer picture is emerging, whereas the first report gave us a snapshot. We can now see a much deeper and wider sense of the impact. And ultimately, the creative economy in India has contracted and is continuing to contract over these few months to come. Organizations are closing permanently to avoid bankruptcy. And the creative businesses are contending with increasingly difficult choices to remain resilient, whether that's about cutting workforce, closing down, cutting overheads, or stopping their programs entirely. Individual professionals and artisans are facing short-term, hand-to-mouth existence. And sectors are adapting to digital and live business models. So a combination of live and digital, which suits some art forms, but by no means all. And some of the workforce is facing leaving the creative economy altogether and moving and changing careers. Some of the headlines of the second report show that 72% of those who work in the creative economy earn less than 50 lakhs per annum in rupees. 22% of the sector is now forecast to lose almost 3/4 of its annual income. And 17% of the sector is facing permanent closure now. Not in the weeks to come, but now, immediately now. 26% of the sector feel that they will not be able to continue beyond the next 2 quarters, i.e. by the end of March, we may have had a contraction of a further 26% of the sector in 3 months' time. So this is serious. In terms of what the creative sector needs to sustain over these next few months, 34% would use any financial intervention towards lost income, 24% would use it towards basic overheads, and 17% would use income towards staff retention and wages. 10% of the sector has moved to online sales platforms, in the past few months to generate income from online. What that means in terms of replacing lost income, we don't quite know yet, but we'll know that by the end of the next cycle of the survey. A key in terms of the sector and access to additional funds, 2% of the sector has been able to access bank loans, and 1% of the sector has accessed government grants. So where there has been support across national and state government departments, that's had some impact, but very, very, very modest. Over the long term, 90% of the sector still fears their ability to remain resilient and to continue as long as social distancing continues to be the way of working. So there's a significant fear about long-term impact of all of this in terms of how they can continue and regroup. And 60% of the sector don't expect to see any shoots of growth or returning to any sense of normality for at least the next 9 months to a year. So there's a really significant learning of the past few months in terms of what we've found from the survey and the reports. I'll just come to some of the headlines in terms of the recommendations of the second report. Just going to get them here. And should you want to be keen enough to go online, it's available on the British Council's website as a download for those who want to see what the second report says. Effectively, concerted action is needed now for investment across the government and corporate sector. So at the institutional level, the sector needs support to really retain any sense of its ability to survive and sustain beyond these next few months. Loans and grants to art organisations mandated as part of CSR funding would be extremely useful in terms of change at a policy level. And that micro grants for freelance artists, workers and artisans would be used to utilise them in terms of hand to mouth over these next few months. And that the use of the National Culture Fund would also be extremely useful to support urban and traditional artists. And they've looked at the festival over these 3 days, and the rural communities, again, this would be extremely useful if funds from the National Culture Fund could also be considered as part of supporting artists across the cities and the metros and the rural countryside as well. To strengthen the creative economy for India's international competitive advantage, national action is needed now and over the longer term to recognise that the culture and the creative sector are integral to the social and the economic fabric of the recovery plan for India. And the sectors need to strengthen their work by coming together to form their own networks, for collective advocacy, sharing of resources, and shared learnings across the diversity of languages, creative industries, and activities of art forms across India's rural, traditional, and contemporary art forms. That's just a quick summary. There are other recommendations that come into the report, but I won't go into any more detail because it's a bit too much to take on. So that's quick headlines of what we've been doing over these last few, over these last few months, which really cuts across the traditional and the contemporary arts here in India. And with that, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. I think you made some very, very pertinent points that we have also been observing in the field for the entire 2020. And you're absolutely sort of on the point when you share that we need a concerted effort. But I'm going to keep it for the second round of questions where I will come back to these issues. So I will now like to invite Ali Pretty, our next panel speaker. Ali Pretty is best known as the founding member and artistic director of the international outdoor arts company Kinetica, which she founded in 1997. Ali has led walking projects in Wiltshire, Isle of Wight, Lincolnshire, Essex, and Thurrock. She is a pioneer of the festival Thurrock 100. Her most ambitious project to date, Silk River, is a river journey linking 10 communities from the banks of the River Thames with 10 along the River Hooghly in West Bengal. So, Ali, I would like to invite you with a question. We want to know what has been your experience of multicultural collaboration and supporting creative businesses benefiting both traditional artists and designers. What has been your experience and your model of working? If you can share that with us.
Well, gosh, listening to Jonathan, it feels amazing that I'm so lucky to have had the experiences that I've had throughout my life, which started in India. So throughout all of my projects, I've worked internationally, and I think one thing then leads to another. So you meet one artist that leads you in a certain direction, inspires your work, and then it takes you on to the next field. And I think as a designer and an artist, it's really important to have these experiences if you can. And I was privileged to have that live. And that really informs the next step of my practice. And I think as a contemporary designer, it's great to understand the rich tradition that these crafts come from. And by understanding them, you can build on that foundation to create something new. And I also, which I will share in my presentation, for the craftspeople who have such amazing skill, I think it's really interesting for them to see, to work with a contemporary designer who takes a different approach. And so I think it's an ever evolving dynamic between different artists. And I highly recommend it if it's possible to have that interaction. So I'm going to give a short presentation now. So I'm the artistic director of Kinetica, and my own practice is in painting large scale silk. Next, please. Next slide, please. So we're a company based now in the east of England, in Essex, and we've been going for over 20 years. And over that time, I've developed a practice which is how to scale up this traditional silk painting onto a really large scale. Next, please. So actually, this journey began in India, so I feel very privileged to be here today. I went to India in 1984, and I was lucky enough to work with the late Habib Tanveer, the director of the Naya Theatre. And actually, I wasn't trained in the arts. I was trained in sociology and politics. And what I really wanted to do as quite a very young woman, I wanted to change the world, like many of us do at that age. And he said, well, Ali, you need to go into politics or social development. You need to be an artist. So that's what I did, inspired by Habib. Next slide, please. So that first trip to India, Habib invited me to Kolkata, and I landed in the middle of Saraswati Puja in January 1985, and had a huge wave of kind of what is happening. This whole city is a festival. But what I left India with that time was the sense that the art and the crafts is just part of everybody's lives. It's right out there in front of you, whether it's the way that you arrange a sari or a market stall. It just inspired me so much visually that everybody seemed to be taking part in the arts, and that's what I've held dear to me for the rest of my life. So next slide, please. The second source of my inspiration for my work has been Trinidad and Trinidad Carnival, which of course has a huge Indian influence in Trinidad. I learned to paint silk, and I was invited by a designer to work on a big carnival production. But it struck me there that the creative economy in Trinidad is really built around carnival. Everybody is involved, whether it's as a maker or a musician or a stall holder. And it's just an abundance of creativity with cultural influence from different parts of the world. And it draws tourism in. So it's really fundamental to the economy of Trinidad. So I was able to take that as an inspiration. I learned again from another artist, Peter Minshall, how to design carnival bands, and that sustained me as an artist for many years as a freelance carnival designer. Next, please. Carnival involves, you can't do it on your own. You have to work with artists of many, many different skills and performance and craft skills. And over a number of years, I designed carnival bands for Notting Hill Carnival. And then I was invited by the British Council and the High Commission to take Carnival to Calcutta. And I worked with a fantastic artist, Dakashaj artist, Ashish Bagchi, who was working for the Pujas to create the headdresses for the idols. And I thought, well, could we adapt that to Carnival? So I worked with Ashish and ordered 250 of these headdresses to come to London. And then we took the Carnival back to Kolkata, which was fantastic. Next, please. So after that experience, I set up Kinetica. Kinetica as a business is a charity, and the charity is called Kinetica People. And that's the core of our work, where we empower communities, engaging them to produce these large-scale artworks, often telling their stories. And this was working in Chile in 2018. Next, please. So the other part, the Kinetica People charity owns the Kinetica Design Studio, which is the commercial arm of Kinetica. So that enables us to take commercial commissions, which can be anything like, this was a closing ceremony in Abu Dhabi, where we worked with local artists from East London to produce these silk, hand-painted silk costumes to go to Abu Dhabi. So any profit that we can gain from creating products or those commercial commissions then gets donated to the charity so we can support our community work. So that's our business model, which we might talk about a bit later. Next, please. But of all the projects, Silk River is the best example so far of the model and how it expanded to an international stage. So this was a collaboration with British Council. Bangla Natak were a core partner in this, and it was connecting communities from West Bengal to London and east of London in 2017 as part of the UK India Year of Culture. Next, please. So we were inspired by the traditional form of Patachitra, which I had experienced for many years in West Bengal, this fantastic form that allows the visual storytelling with the scrolls. And so we set up a residency with some of these artists and the Kanta artists in the Murshidabad district. Next slide, please. And we decided to scale up these stories onto these 6-meter long silk scrolls. And so we worked in Azinganj for 2 weeks with over 50 artists. Next slide, please. So in these groups of artists, we did a mix up. So we had traditional artisans, the Patachitra, Kanta embroiderer, with fashion students from Kolkata. And at first, there was a little bit of a tension between the two as we sort of threw them into the deep end to design these massive scrolls. Next slide, please. But over the period of the 5 days that we were together, they really started working as a team. And once we produced the scrolls, you can see here, they're quite a large scale. It was also easy for the traditional artists to see how perhaps they could adapt their art form for a commercial market by working on the silk and at a larger scale. Next slide, please. But we also learned a lot. So this is a process called batik that we use in pretty much all of our productions. And while we were working with these traditional artists, they were really skilled in the detailed decorative patterns. And this was what we did, what we call the second waxing. So we build up the layer of color, and these artists showed us what we could really do with our art form. So that's an example really of the dynamism between working across different art forms and between traditional and contemporary. Next slide, please. So we produced these 20 scrolls. These are the ones that we produced in India, and we walked 142 miles from Kew Gardens to Southend, and then we came over and we got on a boat from Murshidabad to Kolkata, and in each place the scrolls told the story of that place, and it was accompanied by a live event. Next slide. But the most perhaps lasting legacy for us was that since the beginning of whenever I started painting silk in the early 90s, all of our silk commissions have been on Chinese silk. And when we were researching Silk River, we heard obviously about the famous Murshidabad silk. And through the Crafts Council of West Bengal, we were connected to the weavers in the Murshidabad district. And they produced for us this really high density Murshidabad silk, which is called Teen Tara, which is a triple weave, which means that it's very, very rich and takes the dyes really beautifully. So at that point, the weavers weren't generally weaving that quality of silk, so they had to weave it especially for us. And we ordered 200 meters. So I just want to go on to the next slide and play the film of where we've got to with that. You put the sound.
Set up the loom, and then they will weave at home. We asked the weavers to weave us a specific batch so that it would take the dye beautifully, and each piece is hand woven. We've been very fortunate to develop this relationship with those families, understand how it's made, and develop a relationship directly with the weavers. For us, it's really important because this is an ancient craft. It's really specialist knowledge, which if we can use this silk, we can keep that industry alive. So we are now importing this silk directly from the weavers, and we are able to offer it to the UK market.
Thank you. So yeah, we're hoping that this will leave a legacy with the weavers in Murshidabad, and we're also producing our own silk products that we hope to develop over the years. So next slide, please. So really, this was all of those 20 scrolls on the Murshidabad silk, and really I have just to thank India and Bengal in particular for this long-lasting influence on my life and my work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ali. Amazing, absolutely. I mean, amazing presentation and the work and your way of working that you shared. So, and interestingly, our next speaker is Tajkira. We will hear from her. But then just to mention that Ali, she has worked with you in the Silk River project. So I think it's wonderful that we have both of you on the same platform, and we are going digital with the changing ways that Jonathan was also mentioning, and it's just so exciting. So to introduce Tajkira, we have been working with Tajkira for the last decade, and she is an entrepreneur today, a social entrepreneur, I would say, because when we had started working with her and people in her village, the village itself was economically and socially very marginalized. People knew about the Katha craft, but they did not pursue it as their livelihood. Tajkira's leadership has been instrumental in actually bringing the women of this village into the craft as livelihood. And today, Tajkira runs an enterprise of 300 women. And under her leadership, there are more entrepreneurs coming up, and we have over 600 women practicing this craft regularly that has changed their lives completely. So I will let Tajkira share the rest of her journey. Like, I think I'll just quickly mention that she has also, because we are talking about multicultural collaboration, she has traveled the world. She has traveled to France, Lithuania, Germany, Japan, and Sweden. And she has gone to Paris to teach her craft. So I think a massive and a brilliant experience. So we go to Tajkira. So the first question that I will be asking Tajkira, this is for you and the audience, is what has been her journey like from when she wanted to do something with her craft, but there was nothing, till date, where today she runs an enterprise of 300 women and training more women so that they can become self-sufficient. So over to Tajkira. Tajkira di, তুমি একটু বলো যে শুনতে পাচ্ছ?
হ্যাঁ, শুনতে পাচ্ছি। নমস্কার। হ্যালো এভরি, হাউ আর ইউ?
তাজকিরা দি, তুমি একটু আমাদের বলো যে তুমি একদম শুরু থেকে এখনো পর্যন্ত যেই জায়গায় পৌঁছেছো, সেই যে পথ চলাটা, সেই যে তোমার যুদ্ধটা, এবং এখন যেখানে পৌঁছেছো সেখানে যে তুমি এরকম একটা একটা পুরো গ্রামকে তোমার সাথে সাথে এগিয়ে নিয়ে যেতে পেরেছো, তার অভিজ্ঞতাটা কিরকম?
নমস্কার, আমি বীরভূম নানুর থেকে বলছি। আমি একজন খুব সাধারণ ঘরের মেয়ে ও কাঁথা শিল্পী। আমি খুব ছোট থেকেই সূচ সুতো ধরা শিখেছিলাম আমি আমার মা ঠাকুমার কাছ থেকে। আমার বয়স এখন 51, তো প্রায় 40 বছর আগে থেকে মানে সূচ সুতো ধরা শিখেছি। তো তখনকার দিনে এখানে আমাদের এখানে খুবই অসুবিধা ছিল। তো ওই পুরাতন কাপড়গুলো জুড়ে জুড়ে 4টে 5টা বা 3টে করে জুড়ে জুড়ে ওটাই কাঁথা হতো। এই যে কাঁথা হতো, আমি কি বলি না।
So what Tajkira is explaining is that she's been working with this craft since last 40 years. She's learned it from her aunts and her mother. And since the financial condition of her family and of the village overall was not very affluent, so this was the katha they used to make by, piling up old fabric, old saris, mainly used saris, and then creating rugs and quilts for themselves.
তখনকার দিনে এইগুলো পুরাতন কাপড়গুলো জুড়ে জুড়ে কাজ করা হতো অসুবিধার জন্য। তো সেই কাজগুলো হালকা শীতে ব্যবহার করা হতো, এবং কোনো মানুষজন এলে তাদেরকে বিছিয়ে দেওয়া হতো। এবং আমাদের আগের দিনে মেয়েদের বিয়ে হলে অন্তত 4-5টা কাঁথা, বেশি হলে ভালো, তাহলে 4-5টা কাঁথা দিতে হতো। বা বিয়ের আগে জিজ্ঞেস করতো যে তুমি কি কোনো হাতের কাজ জানো? তো হাতের কাজ জানতে এই সমস্ত কাজগুলো বোঝায় কাঁথার। তো তখন তাহলে তার ভালোভাবেই বিয়েটা কিন্তু হতো, মানে কোনো অসুবিধা বলতো না যে ঠিক আছে তাহলে হাতের কাজটাই দেখে দিতে বিয়েটা হতো।
এটা বলিনি। This is very interesting in where she is from, in Nanur. So when this is not just an item of daily use, but it is also given to the bride by the bride's family during the ceremony. And the main criteria for a girl to get married in her village is how much she has the expertise to make these things. So if a girl has the talent or the skill to make katha, she's more eligible.
এবং শুধু বিয়ে নয়, মানে আমাদের কাছ থেকে যে শেষ বিদায় নিত, তখন কিন্তু হাতের কাজ যেটা সব থেকে ভালো, তো সেই সুজনি বা কাঁথা, নকশি কাঁথা দিয়ে তাকে বিছিয়ে বা উপরে ঢাকা দিয়ে 2-4 ঘন্টা তাকে শেষ বিদায় জানানো হতো।
So Shujni was also used at funerals where, the body of the departed was covered by this, and the last respects were paid by the family by offering the departed these, handworks.
এখনো সেই রীতিটা এখনো রয়েছে, বিয়েতে দেওয়া কাঁথা বা শেষ বিদায়ের সময় এখনো সেটা রয়েছে। তো এই সুজনি কাঁথা থেকে ধরুন এটা তো যখন রেওয়াজগুলো ছিল তখন অনুষ্ঠানগুলো করার পরে কাঁথাগুলো কিন্তু বাক্সের মধ্যেই থেকে যেত, তখন অনুষ্ঠান হতো তখন বের করতো। কিন্তু তখন খুবই মানে অসুবিধা ছিল প্রত্যেকই ফ্যামিলিতে, বেশিরভাগ মানে 80% মহিলারা খুবই অসুবিধায় ছিল প্রত্যেকবার।
তোমার এই জার্নিতে মহিলাদের অসুবিধা কি করে তুমি কাটিয়ে আসছো?
তো সেটা আমি এই যে এই সুজনি কাঁথা থেকে এ দেখেন এই যে স্টোল, এখান থেকে আমি এই সুজনিগুলো তো খুব দাম বেশি, সেই জন্য এই যে নকশি কাঁথা স্টোল, স্টোল এটা হচ্ছে ব্লাউজ পিস, এটা হচ্ছে দুপাট্টা, এটা হচ্ছে দুপাট্টা।
একটু উঁচু করে ধরো, একটু উঁচু করে।
এটা হচ্ছে, এগুলো অনেক ভাবেই ব্যবহার হয়, শাড়ির আঁচল হয়, সিঙ্গেল বেডশিট হয়, হালকা শীতে গায়ে দেওয়া হয়। তারপরে ধরুন এই যে কুশন কাভার, কুশন কাভার।
এবার একটু বলো এই যে এত রকম ডাইভার্সিফিকেশন হলো তাতে মহিলাদের নিয়ে তুমি কি করে what Priya is trying to say is that from the traditional shujni that she told you about, she started diversifying the designs and transferring the motifs into more modern products like the stole, the dupatta, wraps, cushion covers.
তো আমার গ্রাম থেকে আমাদের খুব, তখন আমার খুব ছোট বয়সে অল্প বয়সে বিয়ে হয়ে গেছিল, আমি 3 সন্তানের মা, তো আমারও যথেষ্ট অসুবিধা ছিল, যার জন্য আমার গ্রাম থেকে মোটামুটি 19-20 কিলোমিটার রাস্তা শান্তিনিকেতন বোলপুর বলে একটা জায়গা, তো সেখান থেকে একটা রোটারি ক্লাবের দিদি তনুজা সামানি বা মৌসুমী দি, 2-4টে দিদি আমাদের এইসব কাজগুলো আমি ওখান থেকে নিয়ে আসতাম। তারপরে ধরুন ওই 10 টাকা 20 টাকার বিনিময়ের জন্য আমি গ্রামে গ্রামে 2 কিলোমিটার, গ্রামটা তো পুরো বটেই, তারপরে 2 কিলোমিটার 5 কিলোমিটার পায়ে হেঁটে সেই সমস্ত মেয়েগুলোকে কাজ দিতাম। তারপর
so these diversifications that Tajkira made on different products, she started collecting orders for the same from Shantiniketan, and then she started involving other women from her village and started including them in work and generating income for herself and the women around her.
তারপর আমি একটা সেলফ হেল্প গ্রুপ তৈরি করলাম পঞ্চায়েতের থেকে, অসুবিধা ছিল, তারপর একটা খাদির লোন নিয়েছিলাম, সেই সেলফ হেল্প গ্রুপদেরকে নিয়ে লোন নিয়ে, সেলফ হেল্প গ্রুপ থেকেও কিছু লোন নিয়ে এই সমস্ত মহিলাদের আমরা অন্যদের থেকে নিলে তো অল্প পয়সাটা থাকতো, তার জন্য এই লোন নিয়ে বেশ কিছু মহিলাদের নিয়ে মানে এই কাজগুলো আমরা করে ডিআইসি, ডিআরডিসি, তারপরে আপনার রোটারি ক্লাব .com ওনাদের কাছ থেকে আমরা মানে প্রোগ্রাম পেয়েছি। তো সেই প্রোগ্রামের সাহায্যে মানে মেলা, সেই সাহায্যে আমরা অনেক মানুষের সাথে আমাদের পরিচিতি বেড়েছে। এই ভারতের মধ্যে তো সব জায়গাতেই পাঠিয়েছেন, যেমন ধরুন গোয়া, দিল্লি, বোম্বে, বহু জায়গায়, কলকাতা তো গেছি, আগে ভয় করতাম, এখন তো ভাত ঘর মানে বলা যায় হয়। তো এই কাজের সূত্রে আমি কিন্তু 4-5টা বিদেশও গেছি, যেমন ধরুন জার্মান, জাপান, প্যারিস, লিথুনিয়া, ব্যাংকক। তো ওখানে যখন প্যারিসে আমায় যখন বলছে ইন্ডিয়ান টিচার, ইন্ডিয়ান টিচার, আমি তো এত পড়াশোনা জানি না, কিন্তু তখন আমার যে কি ভালো লাগছে মানে আমি ঠিক মানে ভাষায় আপনাদেরকে বলতে পারছি না, এত আমার ভালো লাগছে। তারপর তখন থেকে এসে আমার মনে হলো যে না, আমি যতদিন বাঁচবো আমি এই যে পিছিয়ে পড়া মহিলাগুলোকে, ধরুন যাদের স্বামী নেই, যাদের ছেলে থাকতেও দেখে না, অসহায়, আমার যেমন অসুবিধাটা আগে হয়েছে, সেই অসুবিধাটা যতটা পারবো যেন তাদেরকে আমি বলে দেবো, এই জায়গায় থান পাই, এই জায়গায় আঁকা হয়, এই জায়গায় সুতো পাই, সব নিয়ে আমি কাজটা করব।
So the women that Tajkira started working with around her village, she gradually formed a self-help group and started taking loans, and then started visiting festivals and fairs to sell her products. And that's how her business grew. That's how they started generating income and making more products. And now she's traveled all across India and across the world. And her experience of traveling the world, especially that there's a significant thing that happened in Paris where she went to take a workshop. and people started referring to her as the Indian teacher, and that gave her immense pride. So she plans to continue, and she has decided that she will help how many how many women she can through this craft. And there are a lot of women in need around her place, so she'll try her best to help them out through this craft.
তো আমি যখন প্রথম কাজে বেরিয়েছিলাম তখন কিন্তু আমাকে অনেক রকম বাজে কথা শুনতে হয়েছিল। তো এখানে কিন্তু আমার স্বামী, আমার ছেলে, বিশেষ করে আমার বড় মেয়ে আমাকে প্রচন্ড হেল্প করেছিল, যার জন্য কিন্তু আমি এই জায়গাতে আসতে পেরেছি। আমি ওই বোলপুরটা ধরুন সকাল 9টায় চলে যেতাম, রাত্রি 9টায় আসতাম। তখন আমার ওই মুড়ি ভাজাটা 6 কিলো চাল লাটতে ছাঁকতে ধরুন ওই 6 ঘন্টা লাগতো, সেটা হয়তো রোজগার ছিল আমার 40 থেকে 50 টাকা। আর ওখানে গিয়ে 5টা শাড়ি আঁকলে মোটামুটি 150 টাকা হতো। তো ওই বাড়ির ফ্যামিলির আমার সব ছিল বলে, ওরা সাহায্য করেছিল বলে কিন্তু আমি এই জায়গায় আসতে পেরেছিলাম।
So at the beginning, the neighbors were not that supportive because she went out of the home to continue with her business, but her family had been very supportive to her work. And that is how she could travel to nearby places and, stay out of the house the whole day and do what she did. And that is what has taken her to this place today.
তারপর আমার মা ধরুন বেশি পড়াশোনা জানে না, আমি ক্লাস 4 পর্যন্ত পড়েছি, কিন্তু এই কাজের জন্য আমার 2 ছেলে মেয়ে, বড় মেয়ে এবং ছেলে বিয়ে, আর আমার ছোট মেয়ে ইংলিশে এমএ অনার্স করেছে।
She has not studied beyond the 4th standard, but through this work, she has educated her children, and 2 of her children are graduates, and the youngest is a postgraduate.
তো আমি এটাই চাই যে আমার গ্রামে বা আশেপাশে গ্রামে যেখানে আমি পায়ে হেঁটে হেঁটে 2 কিলোমিটার 5 কিলোমিটার যেখানে কাজ দিয়েছি, সেই সব দিদিরাও কিন্তু এখনো বলে তাজকিরাদি আছে বলে আমার ঘর হলো, তাজকিরাদি আছে বলে মেয়ের বিয়ে দেওয়া হলো। তো সেটাই আমি এখনো পর্যন্ত বাঁচিয়ে রাখতে চাই, যে আমি যে কষ্টটা পেয়েছি তারা যেন না পায়, যে আমার কাছে আসবে বা আমিও যাদেরকে চিনি গিয়ে এই কাজটা যেন আমি তাদেরকে এইভাবেই চালাতে পারি যতদিন আমি বাঁচবো। এটাই আমার আমি তো সেরকম বলতে পারি না, ভুল ত্রুটি হলে ক্ষমা করবেন।
She wants to keep on continuing to help women in need, and she says that she will do her best to help people out and try and solve their problems, whatever is within her reach, and try and continue with this work as long as possible.
কারণ আমাদেরকে খুব কষ্ট পেতে হয়েছে আমি জানি, আমি চাই না যে এইসব মহিলারা আর কষ্ট পায়।
She doesn't want the other women to suffer as she did.
তো আমি বেশিরভাগ মহিলাদের বলি, তোমরা 4-5টা করে শাড়ি কিনো, আমার কাছ থেকে নিলে তো 50 টাকা 100 টাকা আমি 10 টাকার বিনিময়ে করেছি, ওরা হয়তো এখন 50 টাকা 100 টাকা বা 200 টাকা রাখবে, কিন্তু ওরা যদি নিজে একটা করে থান কিনে তাহলে সেখান থেকে 300 টাকা কারো 500 টাকা এক্সট্রা হবে। তো আমি সবাইকেই কিন্তু এটা বলি, আর আমি যত পারবো এটাই করে দেবো, যে আমার কাছে আসবে সেটাও দেখবো, বা আমি যাদেরকে চিনি তাদেরকেও দিয়ে বলবো।
And this is precisely why I started with her introduction saying that she's a social entrepreneur. তাজকিরাদি, তুমি একটু তোমার প্রোডাক্ট যেগুলো পুরনো ডিজাইন আর এখন যেগুলো প্রোডাক্ট ডাইভার্সিফিকেশন থেকে যে নতুন ডিজাইন বা অন্যরকম ডিজাইন যেগুলো তোমরা বানাচ্ছো, ওরকম একটু দেখাবে?
হ্যাঁ, পুরনো ডিজাইন গুলো তো আমি আপনাকে দেখালাম।
Just I asked her to show us the traditional designs as well as the changing diversified modern designs that she's making now.
এখান থেকে এই ফুলগুলো নিয়ে এখানে ভেঙে ভেঙে এই যে যেমন এটা স্টোল হয়েছে, এই যে কুশন কভার।
So this is the traditional Katha Sujni flower motif, and that motif has been placed on modern products like stoles and scarves today, and that is how she is continuing with the tradition of the same style, the same skill set, but making different products. Now stoles and dupattas had been with the community for a very long time, but the newer products that are being made by them are cushion covers and blouse pieces. So this is very interesting. Let me shed some light on this. This is a hundreds of year old design that has been revived from the Guru Sadai Museum in Kolkata. So these kind of designs were lost and they were dying. So Tajkira and her team went to the Guru Sadai Museum, did a workshop, and they're trying to revive these designs by placing them on modern products now.
এই যে মাস্ক গুলো এখন করছি
They're also innovating in creating masks.
ঠিক আছে, খুব সুন্দর তাজকিরাদি তোমার কাজ। তুমি একটু থাকো, এক্ষুনি চলে যেও না, কারণ এখানে অনেককে তোমার কথা শুনে তাদের খুব ভালো লেগেছে এবং তাদের কোনো প্রশ্ন থাকতে পারে, আমি একটু তাদের জিজ্ঞেস করি। So I get back to the panelists and the speakers, and I'll not open the forum now, but in the Q&A discussion later. But right now, Ali, Amber, Jonathan, would you like to ask anything or say anything to Tajkira?
I mean, I'd like to just say how I'm impressed I am with how she's developed all these new products, that she's taken the initiative to go to a museum and do some more studying analysis, and she's sharing it. You know, I think that she's doing exactly what I hope aspire to do, but she's, you know, we're seeing the direct benefits from her work. I'm so super impressed. Yeah, it's beautiful. I need a new debatta now. But thank you. Yeah.
আমি তো বুঝতেই পারলাম না,
তোমাকে বুঝিয়ে দেবে পরপর, আমরা একটু শুনে নিই কে কি বলছে, তারপর প্রচন্ড প্রশংসা করেছেন তোমার এবং বলেছেন যে
ভালো লেগেছে,
হাল চাই,
পুরনো ডিজাইনকে নতুন ভাবে বানাতে চাইছে, তাতে খুব প্রশংসা করলেন।
এর জন্য আপনাদেরকে থ্যাংক ইউ।
Ali, Jonathan, would you like to say anything?
Yes. Hi Tajkira. Hi Shreya. It's
Hi.
so good just to see you. I wish I could just beam myself there. And it's really wonderful to see the work that you're all doing and how you're teaching all of those women in the villages. It's really inspirational and it's so good, especially after what Jonathan was just saying about how difficult it is in the sector that you're keeping on going. So don't stop, keep on doing it. It's fantastic.
এবার আপনাদের দেশে যাব আমি।
Ali, Jonathan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, indeed. Very similar to the previous two. Just how inspiring it is to see what Tajkira is doing with the designs and adapting designs for different kinds of products, but also at the heart of things is empowering the women in the village, and that's such an important part of the community life, the rural life, but also how arts and crafts are integral, as I was saying, to everyday life in India, but how a few modern twists also referring back to the heritage and bringing those designs back into the kind of new products. It's really beautiful.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Amber. So, Tajkira di, Shreya তোমাকে বলে দেবে এখন ডিটেইলে। আমরা এখন আমাদের নেক্সট সেশনে চলে যাই। থ্যাংক ইউ, ভীষণ ধন্যবাদ এবং ভীষণ সুন্দর করে তুমি বললে, আমাদের খুব ভালো লেগেছে। হ্যাঁ, তুমি আরেকটা কিছু দেখাচ্ছিলে।
হ্যাঁ, এটা যেমন ধরুন আমাদের এই দৈনন্দিন জীবনে যেটা হতো আর কি, এই যে ঢিকিতে এই দুনিতে জল তুলছে, মানে গ্রামে যখন জমিতে ধানে জল পেতো না, জল তুলছে, এটা রান্না করছে, এই যে পুজোতে ঢাক বাজাচ্ছে, চুল কাটছে, মানে এইসব জিনিসগুলো, এই যে মাঠে চাষ দিচ্ছে, হ্যাঁ, এই যে মাছ কাটছে, মানে গ্রামীণ একটা সিন। এটা ধরুন এইগুলো এখন মানে বেশি ভালো মানুষে পছন্দ করছে। তো আমাদের মনের ভাবনাটা এখানে আমরা তুলে ধরেছি যে এরকম ভাবে করলে পরে হয়তো চলবে, কিন্তু সেইভাবে সেটা চলছে।
So what Tajkira explained right now is just a description of a village scene that was a part of the traditional Kantha practice since ages. Now they are trying to portray the village that is around them, and talking about the place they live in, and that is how they're trying to talk about themselves and their community.
I think like in Patachitra, they paint the stories, they are stitching the stories, but they are still saying the stories of their village. So thank you, Tajkira di. Thank you. Khub bhalo bolecho. Thanks, Shreya, for coordinating it so well from there. Now we will get back to our second panelist, Amber Khokar. and I would like to start by introducing her. Amber Coker is an artist and designer who was personally commissioned by His Royal Highness Princess Charles to design a 40-meter carpet for Buckingham Palace. She designs, makes, and educates from her London studio. With a vast and global clientele, Amber's commission work has included pieces for the Ayala Museum in Manila, the Islamic Art Museum in Malaysia, and Rolls-Royce, UK. Amber's work has traveled internationally with pieces shown in New York, Riyadh, Cairo, and the UK. An alumnus of Central St. Martin's School of Art, Amber studied with Dr. Pramod at Harvard University before continuing her passion for lecturing at Birkbeck University as part of the World Art and Artifacts program, and she is currently tutoring MA students in traditional art. Amber, my question to you is, you have a fascinating background of Indian temple architecture, masters in traditional arts, and integrating your learning and experience in high-end designs. Can you share the highlights of this journey and about your inspiration? How did you bring these three strands together and what your journey has been like?
Well, funnily enough, it was all consolidated by a British Council scholarship to study poster design in Soviet Warsaw, Poland. And there I met artists who were very much concerned about the ideas and and expressing higher principles in their designs within a system that didn't have the technology available in the West, and had very clear definitions of what could and couldn't be shared. So they were working within these restraints. They were also had a global, universal kind of education and attitude towards art. So they kind of gave me the strength to an impetus to go and search for my heritage, and which I felt to a certain extent I had lost in my art education in London. And so that's why I ended up working with Dr. Pramod Chandra in the States, in Harvard. You know, so I was learning Indian art and architecture from through an Indian lens, and then back to London again with my tutors Keith Critchlow and Paul Marchant, who were looking at traditional art, and specifically to the place of nature as the great leveler and teacher. So so there was many different things going on, but they all consolidated, and this is my path and journey now, and I get very excited, feel passionate about holding on to these traditions. So that's it. You know, it was really lovely to see Tajkira's movement towards her heritage, going to local museums and exploring. So really that is my journey and my passion. So what I would like to do is, should I move on to my PowerPoint, my presentation, if that's all right?
Yeah.
Great. If we could go to the next page. So yes, I'd like to start off with a few gentle reminders to all the artists here, to remember, we are unique, and we're in a very privileged position because our crafts offer authenticity, human handmade quality, as we've seen with Ali and Tajkira, beautiful stories, precious traditions, and an appreciation and honouring of local kind of sustainable practices. And I hope in what I do that I am instilling that in people that I work with. If we could go on to the next slide, thanks. So this is a project I did recently in Baku in Azerbaijan, who in the past were very much part of the silk routes that Ali was mentioning, and they had a very clear connection to Southeast Asia. And you can see that in the architecture and caravanserais they have there. Here I am working with students who, it's a 4-year course, some of them are jewelers, some of them enamelers, woodworkers, block printers, ceramicists, and graphic designers, a real mixture of art forms. And in this project, they were looking at local architecture and these very beautiful, kind of typically Central Asian use of brick. If we could, and developing those patterns, understanding those patterns, and then developing them into enamel and woodwork. If we could go on to the next slide, thanks. And so these are some of the products, as well as looking at design, you know, like Tajkira, we were looking at products that, that would sell. So these are business card holders, basically a variety of products to use on desks, on stationery, as kind of, the other thing they were looking at was gifts that could be exported, gifts that could be posted, mailed. So they were thinking on practical level as well, but also there was a real attention to finish and detail, because that's something we realized that was would carry these products to a slightly different level. And if we can continue to the next slide, thank you. And then we were working in between, you know, interdisciplinary work as well. So we're working alongside ceramicists to create this beautiful chessboard. And again, these were kind of one-off commissions. They do take time, but they were selling, so they did tremendously well with these products. So if we could go on to another one. Next, please. And again, we took the same methodology, looked at local buildings, analysed the patterns. So that's something I had to look into. And then we developed these into kind of wax resist block printing on silk. So we were using local material. So Azerbaijan has a tradition of silk production, which is in decline. And they were also looking at local dyes. I think they were using pomegranate indigo. So it was very much a local narrative. Can we move on to the next? Yes, I'm sorry, I'm still a teacher, so I've thrown in a few quotations, and I do want to remind us that, you know, natural materials, natural process, and an accepting heart are the ingredients that we need to create these beautiful works. If we could carry on to the next one. So alongside all of this making, we realized that we had to find, we had to promote these works. So that was done through online brochures and printed brochures. And where possible, we used friends and model, local friends really, to create an atmosphere within the buildings that the patterns came from as well. So I think that is really contextualizing it as well is an integral part of what you need to do to promote your products. If we could go on to the next one, that'd be lovely. Oh yeah, so yeah, more quotes. You know, Tagore, I probably don't need to tell you this. So what is art? The response of man's creative soul to the call of the real. And then again, talking about crafts used to spring out of the hearts and the hands of man. And I think that what we're seeing in the work that we've been looking at today is that is happening again. So if we could move on to the next one. Yeah, so once again, so we were working with carpet designers. So they were looking at very traditional carpets, things that some people had at home, other people had to go and visit in museums, and then a very clear, close analysis of that. And then that was adapted from these beautiful rectangular patterns onto, if we could go on to the next slide, to circular motifs and designs. And people loved, these were fairly large earthenware platters, and they were very popular. We found we had to make stands to work with them so that they were available as display pieces. They were also available to hang, but they were also, we also used glazes that worked with kind of wet foods and dry foods. So that was, all those considerations came into everything we were doing. If we could go on to the next slide. We also realized that as well as these very time-consuming hand-painted plates, we needed to offer other plates that were more affordable. So these were made using plaster molds. So we were constantly, so you literally pour the wet clay into a mold and then glaze that. So we were constantly looking at ways of reinterpreting the products and the designs. And if I could move on to the next one. So yeah, sorry, more quotes. So talking about the education of the craftspeople, putting practice as important as theory. And I think in some cases we've missed the importance of the hand-based work. And I'm seeing all around me and hearing locally that people do want to work with their hands. They're using it as a form of therapy, as a form of coping with the current situation. If we could go on to the next slide. Thank you. So again, Tagore talking at Brindabath this time about the shift that he made in the Bengal movement of moving back into traditional Indian art movement forms. If we could go on to the next one, thank you. So this was another project again in Baku. So I'm working with students and technicians who are competent in this form of inlay filigree work. And if we could go on to the next one, this particular design was based on drawings that we did within the classroom. So on the left, we have some of the students from Baku working with local flowers. And then on the right, we have some of the students from Cairo. Hi, I've got a couple of messages. Madura, do I need to check anything with you? Is everything going okay?
No, I think my connection went off a little bit, so it went twice. You just have a minute. That I just wanted to flag that.
Oh, fine.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, great. So with the students in Baku, it's a 4-year course, and they're roughly aged between 18 to 30. Whereas in Cairo, I'm working with students from the age of about 19, 20 to 60 or 60 plus. And some of them are leather makers, some of them are calligraphers, some of them carpet weavers. So a real a mixture, and most of them are established craft designer makers in Cairo, whereas in Baku, they're still training. Next, please. Great. So these again, some of the jewelry that designs they were working on, which really were based on the work that we were doing. So once again, we were looking at silver, gold, and shell, all locally sourced as far as possible, and then again offering quite a range with pricing. So that flexibility had to be included in everything they considered. If we could go on to the next one. Oh, so now this is some of the work that I've done here in London. So these are tiles that were inspired by a man called William de Morgan. So he was practiced in the kind of 19th century and was a very good friend of William Morris, who the two of them were part of what's called the British Arts and Crafts movement. If we could go on onto the next slide. So this is some of the work William de Morgan did. This is made in London, but it's definitely, it's very obviously influenced by Ottoman 15th, 16th century Ottoman or Iznik ceramics. So I'm showing this because I'm showing you how that this quintessentially British art movement, the arts and crafts, looked to Ottoman Turkey and to India and to Persia for inspiration and came out with this beautiful synthesis of work. And all of us practicing artists and craft people are in this position as well. You know, we have this ability and this understanding, appreciation of art. Ironically and sadly, he gave up ceramics because he said it wasn't profitable. And he would know he was the son of a mathematician. And he ended up moving into a different area of arts, but as his work is unbelievably collectible, and it's very beautiful. If we could move on to the next slide. So this is an interpretation that I did. I was asked to use a much more contemporary color palette of this idea of the rose, and this was used in London, Tower Hamlets, in Toynbee Hall. So these were hand painted tiles. One of the lessons we did learn when we were kind of when I'm making huge quantities, that we did need to bring in people who were there just to paint and kind of separate the painting from the designing. So that was how we coped with huge orders. If we could possibly go on to the next slide. Okay, so I couldn't help putting this in. This is two of my students. That's Prasad at the back and Aisha at the front. And I mentioned to you Iznik ware, which is this, you can actually see one of the plates, they're sketching in the British Museum, and you can see the plates, one of the plates they're sketching from. So this is the Turkish Ottoman designs, which really did travel along the Silk Roads. And then we have a series of my interpretation of this design. So it's a very different palette, but playing around with the same flowers and motifs and the symbolism behind those flowers and motifs, because that's really important to me. It's very easy these days to appropriate images. And so that kind of, for me, the research and the connection and is an integral part that ensures authenticity and a very different relationship with the work and the motifs and the results as well. So can we move on to the next slide? And again, that here I am using similar motifs. This was a pot made by a ceramicist in Cairo. So we worked together to create a form and started once again playing with these very traditional motifs, but trying to put a slightly different perspective on them. And I think the next one, if we could do, yeah, so this was another project. So this was in London, using traditional geometry. And again, it's using the a 10-fold geometry pattern, which 10 is a number I get quite excited about. It's the number 1 and it's the number 0. And it's 0 as a symbol of eternity and 1 as the manifestation. And that was so that was kind of very closely with the manufacturer and with the kind of digital side to make this pattern, to get the colors exactly right, because it's another problem I've noticed with commission work is you often in the past you've handed over a design and artists like myself obsessed get lost, whereas this was very beautiful to be working. I work with natural pigments, so I'm like hand ground paints, and then to be able to translate that onto dyes and get that accurate was quite a challenge. And if we go next one, please. So these were some drawings. These were the initial drawings I did for the Buckingham Palace Commission. So they started off, again, I'm using natural pigments. So I'm using, it was a beautiful brief. I was told by the head of the royal household to do what you usually do, which I think all of us, any makers listening, know that's such a rarity. So these were, I was looking at flowers. So the rose very much symbolized a symbol of Britain, so of England, especially the red and the white, and then also daffodils. I was looking to poetry and using those as the inspiration behind this design. If we could move on to the next one. Yeah, so this was the final 40-meter outcome. It's in the picture gallery in Buckingham Palace. And again, it was interesting because I was able to design, work with the carpet makers. So I sat with them literally as they translated my drawing from these, all of them pencil sketches, to the computer. The hardest part of it actually, when I was asked to leave a shape or two in it to make it look handmade. So that was the most painful part for me. But because obviously I wanted to do, make something perfect. Could we move on to the last slide? So I've got I'm ending with a quote from William Morris, okay? For art breeds art, and every worthy work done is a delight for the maker. And he's telling us, and he's hoping that this handmade work is very different and there will always be a demand for it. And William Morris had so much admiration for the crafts of India. He spoke extensively on what was happening in his time in the 1800s onwards with the crafts there. And he really did value the handmade. So that's me done.
Thank you, Amber. I think in your work, I mean, the integration of design, of architecture, of concepts, of all those things have come in so beautifully. Thank you very much for such a wonderful presentation. So I'd like to start the second round of questions for our speakers. So I would like to go to Jonathan first. And my question to you, Jonathan, is drawing from the data that you shared and many of the comments that are coming in also, yes, situation is very challenging and it is a time for concerted effort. But then we all understand working in this sector that there is a gap in understanding what is the potential of creative economy. Like in our country, we don't even have a definition of what is creative economy. Exactly what you were saying, that in UK, these are the sectors, but we can't really identify. So, but then at the same time, it is not an unorganized sector per se. It is just differently organized sector. And our understanding and our work with them are based on our understanding of their culture and their lifestyle. So my question to you is, what do you think is required, or what can be done to strengthen the advocacy and awareness about the potential of creative economy? Because we seem to not be able to, get through with that concept. Everything just remains in silos. So how do you think that can be promoted?
Very good question. I think it's a combination of structure and systemic issues, really. So if India has 200 million artisans, all part of the informal economy, all working across rural India, in remote locations, in multiple languages, in many different types of crafts and skill, which are born out of the tradition and the heritage, how can we ensure that those skills and those designs are adapted? And there's amazing examples we've just seen here, Amber, of how that is possible to sustain that sense of the intangible heritage and the skills. And then the amazing work that is going on the ground with Tajkira, and also with Ali, with her work in the Silk Routes and the Silk Rivers, kind of the narrative that kind of binds us all together in this kind of inspiring world of craft and design and heritage. But as you say, it's hard to get a handle on it. And it's hard to get a handle on it partly because of the sheer scale of India, but partly because I think it's much more complex than the UK is. If we think about some of the structural and systemic interventions in the UK, so the population of the UK is what, 70 million nearly, 200 million artisans alone in India, and that's just those that we kind of think we know of. So immediately, that's massively different. But governance-wise, it's sort of simpler. There is one UK government and the devolved nations in Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. And there is one government department that is responsible for supporting culture, media, and sport, within which sits design and craft. Craft doesn't quite have its own category in the UK, but certainly does in India because it's so much more significant in India. So structurally, it's simpler. The UK, since the late 1990s, has been recording and mapping the creative economy across the different sectors. So it's institutionalized within the department, and then how organizations like Creative Scotland, Arts Council Wales International, Arts Council Northern Ireland, Arts Council England, all of them support the sector. It's sort of there, there's a structure to it, and it's ongoing. And then because care of the Treasury in the UK, care of the creative economy is coded into the system. Care of income tax, care of VAT, care of corporation tax. So the government knows what the national GDP is of the creative economy. So if all of that was sort of applicable to India, which is much more complex, where we have 29 state governments, one national government, and where the creative economy sits across at least 9 government departments that we know of: culture, tourism, handloom, handicraft. So there is no one central way of looking at all of that. But at least if we can provide some insight onto the value and start to at least help shape some of that thinking, we can do something around how we can old ways of understanding that this isn't just about the livelihoods of Tachkira and the women that she so importantly works with, but it's also what the value does for the wider economic impact across all of India. And it really is, to my mind, arts and heritage and culture in India is its absolute competitive advantage, more than maybe other industries. So we need to really keep advocating for that in terms of what it does and what it says about modern India and about traditional India, because these things sit side by side. Absolutely. The fact that we've had Tachkira speaking from her village, speaking to us online, shows how adaptable and entrepreneurial and vibrant and vital and imaginative and agile the whole of this sector is. So really, that's what I want to kind of park for now and then pass back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. I think, I mean, again, these are so sort of echoing the situations or the aspects that we keep on advocating for, but we just wish that exactly what you said, more evidence building happens and more institutionalization happens so that we can really see and measure the evidence and understand the potential and then carry on. But at the same time, I think you also made this interesting point about Tachkira, about how adaptable she is. And my second question is to Ali and Amber. So I'll go to Ali first. And it's the same question I would like to know is what, according to you, is the way forward for strengthening creative industries in a globally connected world? If you can focus on that based on the traditional industries, because I think this is becoming more and more sort of important and relevant in today's world. So because both of you have worked with such a wide range of artists and art and in different places, so I would like to know, what do you think is the way forward for strengthening this in a globally connected world? So Ali, you want to go first?
Okay. Well, I think seeing Tachkira there along with Shreya in Bengal with the women behind her sewing, I think one of the real important points that came across there, and I would like to say is really important in the way that I work, is how the creativity brings that community together. So she's not just thinking about her product, she's thinking about the women, how she can empower them, also how their stories are on their embroidery in their work. And I think, you know, having that strength in the community is a first and core basis for the strength of the industry. And then having like an agency like Bangla Natak that enable them to be connected to the commercial and global market, I think that it's a really, really good example of how the authenticity and integrity of the work and the artisans is maintained, and they have ownership of the means of production. So, you know, even in the chat line, it's like, oh, if you want to buy something from Tachkira, here's her mobile phone number. You know, you're cutting out all of those middlemen, which in India, there are many, many middlemen, and there are quite a few everywhere in the world. There's always somebody who's going to try and make some money off the artisans so that their fees are reduced. So I think, you know, having real strong communities at the core is probably the way forward. And I think that there's, you know, from some of the work that we did in Silk River, there is still a way to go. So we have been talking with Bangla Natak how we could continue to work with the artisans to use the silk and create products out of the Patachitra, which is beyond the scrolls. And that would be something that I would still like to see, how there's more of a circular economy, because if the Patachitra started working on the Murshidabad silk, it would impact on the Murshidabad weavers. So it would impact on another industry. So how can you connect up those different industries together to make more of a kind of critical impact? And I suppose I'd just like to say, bringing it back here to the UK, yes, Jonathan's right. We've got much more of a sort of centralized or structured system. We have the Arts Council, without which Connecticut couldn't exist. But also, we also have communities that are very struggling massively at the moment with COVID, and where we're based in Southeast Essex, it's one of the highest rates and the poorest of the communities. So for me, I am trying to train as many women as possible, not just women, but it tends to be women, in the hand painted, and I'm with Amber on the hand painted silk. So, you know, in our studio, we have a fantastic studio, and when we have these commissions, it's hours and hours and hours of painting and hand waxing, but they love it. And, you know, I could have single women who can drop in from 10 till 2, they can be paid on an hourly rate. So what I want to do is get, you know, as many commercial commissions as possible, so I can employ and train local women in that community, which also gives them, that will give, you know, the community that we're in Purfleet, which is so, you know, in need of development. If I could employ women there by getting more commercial commissions, that would make that place famous for hand painted silk in London. We need that too here. So that's my response.
Thank you, Ali. Amber, the same question for you. What do you think? What can be done more? What is the way forward for strengthening creative industries in a globally connected world? So over to you, Amber.
Sure. I think you know, I agree with everything Ali said, and it's a challenge. You know, we're all finding it. I'm based in Cockpit Arts, and I think there's about 70 studios here, and they're emptying at the moment. People can't managing function. I mean, and I think the way to go is it's this marriage of modern and traditional, digital kind of, which is global, international, but also local is so important. And then, you know, and I think also, yeah, our identity and our space is really, you know, we still have something unique to offer. And, you know, we are in a very privileged position because we can make with our hands. And the issue is how to get that out there. I found myself doing more teaching by Zoom. You know, as was said, it's not what I want to do. I would much rather kind of be in a room with human beings, but at least I've been able to teach students in Baku and trying to adjust courses. I think I've done work for the William Morris Society, so open lectures. I've done lectures for Crafts Week, so they've all been Zoom based, you know. And I'm still getting the hang of it, but I think that seems to be the way to go, you know. And you know, there's lots of other platforms, kind of digital platforms, you know, that we can explore. I mean, we don't know how long this is going to last. That's the
right.
And so we do have to kind of be incredibly fluid. You know, I'm finding out from non-artists that platforms like Instagram are working. I don't think necessarily they're working for sales, which is what I've been hearing, but they've been working for exposure. So I don't know.
I think we are all in this kind of a situation where we are all trying to explore what works digitally really. And I think the ways of, the changing ways of work is also something that we are all adapting to. It's not just Tajgira, or it's all of us. We are all sort of struggling to, you know, adapt to that, I would say. Thank you.
Curve, isn't it?
Yeah.
But at least we're all together with it.
Right. So now we will again go to another village of the Baul music, and we will meet a woman Baul singer. Her name is Nitto Priya Mandal, and she started learning music at the age of 10, and she mainly learned her music from her parents. And then after she got married, she learned her music from her husband. And she has been performing across Bengal and also in Assam, Tripura with her husband. And today she's one of the iconic woman baul singers who is an inspiration to many other women coming forward to be baul singers. So we will hear from Nitto Priya. Nitto Priya, তোমাকে একটু অপেক্ষা করতে হলো। নমস্কার, শুনতে পাচ্ছি না তোমার কথা।
তো পাচ্ছ না? ঠিক আছে, অসুবিধা নেই।
হ্যাঁ, এবার শুনতে পাচ্ছি আমি। So I will ask Nitto Priya what her life has been like when she has been pursuing baul music as her profession and how she continues her livelihood. So Nitto Priya, তুমি একটু আমাদের বলো যে তুমি যে বাউল গান গাইতে আরম্ভ করলে এবং তারপরে বাউল গান নিয়ে যে তোমার এখন জীবনে যে এটাই তোমার মেন কাজ, যেটা দিয়ে তুমি তোমার পরিবারও চালাও, তোমার স্বামীর সাথেও গাও, এই অভিজ্ঞতাটা তোমার কিরকম? তোমার কেমন লাগে? কিভাবে তুমি এখানে পৌঁছলে এবং আজকে তোমার স্বপ্ন কি? এরপরে তুমি কি করবে? কারণ তুমি অনেকটা এগিয়ে এসছো, তুমি একটু তোমার মতো করে যদি বলো।
সবার প্রথমে আমার মায়ের বাড়ি সবাই গান করে, মা বাবার হাত ধরেই গান শেখা। তারপরে আমি কিছুদিন পদাবলী কীর্তনে ছিলাম। তারপরে আমার বিয়ে হয়ে যাওয়ার পর আমার স্বামী সুজয় মণ্ডল, ও আমাকে কিছু লোকগীতি গান শিখিয়েছিল। তখন আমরা দুজনেই লোকগীতি গান করতাম। তারপরে যখন আমরা এই জায়গা পেয়েছি, আমাদের ওয়ার্কশপ করানো হয়েছে আমাদের বাংলানাটক.com থেকে, সেখানে গিয়ে আমরা যেমন তারকখ্যাপা, ভজন দাস বৈরাগ্য, নারায়ণ দাস অধিকারী বা রীনা দাস, ওনাদের কাছ থেকে আমরা মূলত বাউল গান শিখেছি দুজনেই, এখনো শিখছি ওনাদের কাছে। এবং এই প্রোগ্রামটাই আমার জীবিকা। আর এইখানে আমরা যেহেতু প্রোগ্রাম করি, আমার সঙ্গে আরো কিছু লোক যায়, তাদেরও প্রোগ্রামটাই জীবিকা। আর আমরা এমনি পাবলিক প্রোগ্রামও করি। আমাদের শান্তিনিকেতনে অনেক গেস্ট আসে বাইরে থেকে, বিদেশ থেকেও আসে শান্তিনিকেতন দেখতে। তখন ওরা আমাদেরকে ডাকলে সেখানেও আমরা যাই, প্রোগ্রাম করি। আর আমাদের এই বোলপুর, সুপুর, জয়দেব, তারপরে ইলামবাজার, এই সমস্ত জায়গায় আমাদের অনেক পুরনো বাউল আছে, যারা মূলত বাউল, তারা ঘরোয়া না, মানে তাদের অনেক 2-4 পুরুষ আগে থেকেই তারা বাউল। তাদের কাছ থেকেও আমরা কিছু কিছু শিখি। যেমন অনেকজনের বাড়ি সাধু সঙ্গ হয়, তখন আমাদের ডাকে, আমরা সেখানেও যাই। সেরকম আমাদের গ্রামের মধ্যে দেখা যায় কোনো জায়গায় ছোট ছোট অনুষ্ঠান হয়, সেখানেও আমরা যাই, সেখান থেকেও কিছু পাই। এইভাবেই আমাদের চলে। আর এই যে বড়,
আমি একটু বলে নিই বাকিদের, তুমি তো বাংলায় বলছো। So what she's saying is that she learned her music from her parents, and then her husband is right here. You can meet him also. He's sitting beside her. And I think it's wonderful to see this kind of mutual support. So what she basically said is how she has been leading her life, doing various programs in her village, around her village and outside. And the fact that this has been her main profession and this is her livelihood by which she supports her family fully. And both her husband and she continues to do this. So I think again it is absolutely wonderful. So Nitto Priya, তুমি একটু আমাদের একটু দুকলি গান শুনিয়ে দাও না, আমরা অনেকক্ষণ কথা বলছি, একটু যদি আমরা শুনতে পাই। So I'm just requesting her to sing 2 lines of a song just for everyone to have a flavor of her music.
এই গানটা যেমন, এটা গুরুতত্ত্বের উপর গান। এই গানটার মহাজন হচ্ছে হরিদাস গোসাই, এবং আমরা শিখেছি তারক খ্যাপার কাছ থেকে আমাদের এই ওয়ার্কশপেই শিখেছি।
This song is based on the Guru Tattva, and she has learned this song from the great master Taruk Khapa.
পদে মন আছে যার পারে যাওয়ার ভাবনা আনন্দেতে থাকবো সদায় আনন্দেতে থাকবো সদায় নিরানন্দে করবে কি পারে যাওয়ার ভাবনা পদে মন আছে যার পারে যাওয়ার ভাবনা সাধু গুরুর সঙ্গে যাব চরণ ধুলায় ঘর বানাবো হরি নামের বেড়া দেব হরি নামের বেড়া দেব বাতাসে করবে কি পারে যাওয়ার ভাবনা পদে মন আছে যার পারে যাবার ভাবনা পদে মন আছে যার পারে যাবার ভাবনা পদে মন আছে যার পারে যাবার ভাবনা।
খুব সুন্দর, খুব সুন্দর, খুব ভাল লাগলো। তোমাকে আমি আর একটা জিনিস জিজ্ঞেস করতে চাই, সেটা হচ্ছে যে তোমাদের গ্রামে তো এখন ট্যুরিজম আরম্ভ হয়েছে বা হচ্ছে, এখন তোমার ওখানেও একটা আখড়া আছে, আরো লোকজন যাবে, হয়তো তোমাদের বাড়িতে গিয়েই ওখানেই যারা গান শুনতে চায়, যারা গান ভালোবাসে, যারা শ্রোতা, তারা গিয়ে ওখানে থাকবে, শুনবে। তো এই পুরো ব্যাপারটায় তোমাদের কিরকম লাগছে, আপনারা দুজনেই যদি একটু বলেন এটা। So I asked her that now with the promotion of her village, her place and their village, there will be more music lovers visiting her place and going there, listening to music, being there. So they will have an akhra where there will be music for the music lovers. So what does she feel about this kind of a change where people are coming to her home and enjoying her music? বলো।
আমাদের অবশ্যই এটা খুবই ভালো লাগছে। আমাদের যেমন আমরা আগে কি করতাম, যারা মানে ঘুরতে আসতো তারা আমাদেরকে ডাকতো, আমরা তাদেরকে যে গান শোনাতাম। কিন্তু এখন যদি আমরা সেই সুযোগটা পাই যে আমার আখড়ায় এসে যদি গান শোনে, সেটা অবশ্যই খুব আনন্দের, খুব মানে খুব লাকি মনে করবো আমরা দুজন অন্তত। আর আমাদের বোলপুরের মধ্যেই বাড়ি, খুব বেশি দূর নয়। আর সেইভাবে মানে যে খুব হাই ফাই আমরা দেখাতে পারবো সেরকম কিছু নয়। আমার বাড়ি ছোট্ট বাড়ি, সুন্দর আখড়া, ছোট্ট ঘরের চাল। হ্যাঁ, তো আসলে আমরা অবশ্যই খুব আনন্দিত হব।
So what she's saying is both of them, they will love to receive audiences in their house, and she will be extremely happy if people visit, because hosting them will be a pleasure for her, and it will be a wonderful experience for them as well as for the people who are visiting. So I think that's wonderful. So I will just like to ask Orpon, আর কোনো আমাদের গান আছে যেটা আমরা দুকলি শুনে শেষ করতে পারি, বা ইনস্ট্রুমেন্ট সম্বন্ধে যদি একটু বলে। ইনস্ট্রুমেন্ট গুলো একটু বাজিয়ে একটু ইনস্ট্রুমেন্ট সম্বন্ধে বলে দাও।
The instrument which Nitto is playing, this is called ektara. It's a single string drone instrument, and the instrument she's playing with her left hand, it's called dugi. This is called dugi, the hand percussion. And the instrument Shujoy is playing, it's called dotara. It's a signature string instrument of bow.
ছোট্ট করে
মিঠাই দ্বন্দ্ব করো বসাই কোন রঙে বানাইয়াছো ঘর কোন রঙে বানাইয়াছো ঘর বসাই কোন রঙে বানাইয়াছো ঘর মিঠাই দ্বন্দ্ব করো বসাই কোন রঙে বানাইয়াছো ঘর
আরে ঘর খানি কামড়ারও ছাউনি ছন্দে বন্দে জোড়া গোসাই ছন্দে বন্দে জোড়া তাহারও ভিতরে ময়ূরার
করিতেছে রঙের খেলা গোসাই কোন রঙে বানাইয়াছো কোন রঙে বানাইয়াছো ঘর গোসাই কোন রঙে বানাইয়াছো কোন রঙে বানাইয়াছো ঘর গোসাই কোন রঙে বানাইয়াছো কোন রঙে বানাইয়াছো ঘর গোসাই কোন রঙে বানাইয়াছো
থ্যাংক ইউ নিত্য প্রিয়া খুব ভাল লাগলো খুবই ভাল লাগলো আমাদের মানে আরেকটু সময় থাকলে আমরা আরো কথা বলতে পারতাম কিন্তু অনেকটা দেরি হয়ে গেছে কিন্তু খুব ভাল লাগলো আপনাদের দুজনকেই নমস্কার অনেক ধন্যবাদ আমরা এখন আবার ফেরত চলে যাব আমাদের স্পিকারদের কাছে so let's have a gallery view because I think we'll be closing now I think for closing I would first, I would like to apologize to the audience because of lack of time. We could not take your questions, though I understand that many of your questions have been answered by our speakers on the chat. But then I would also like to say that we have shared our organization ID. Please send your questions there. And if you really want to interact and ask more questions to our speakers, and we will definitely forward those to our speakers and have them connected. So I'm so sorry, but we can't take audience questions now because it's already quite late, but we will definitely reply back on emails and the email ID is given. So at the conclusion, I think Ali, Amber, Jonathan, I would just like to sort of ask you can you, each of you, share one point about what is your takeaway from this webinar? Jonathan, may I go with this line? What has been your, because we saw different aspects, right? I mean, we have looked at hard data, we have looked at the creativity, we have looked at multicultural collaboration, we have looked at empowerment of women, we have looked at so many women artists here. I mean, I think there are so many women performers, women artists on the platform itself. So what is your takeaway from today's webinar?
Mine is really simple, and I think you've just summarized it in so many ways, but actually it came from Amber's presentation. It's head, heart, and hand. And I think we've been affected by the head, by the statistics. We're affected by the heart, by the performances, and by the design and the inspiration of what the crafts people are actually making and creating and designing and adapting. And that's about the hand. So really, to me, that was such a brilliant 3 H's. I think that's my takeaway.
Thank you. I think, yes, I mean, so Ali, what is your takeaway from the webinar? Ali, you are muted.
Yeah, I'm here. I think it is that COVID is going to make us realise even more how important community is, and that really, as Amber says, the digital can't replace the community. And I think in healing and in the recovery, the creative economy and the arts and the performance are going to play an ever increasingly important role, not just really in creating products, but in binding people together, seeing Tajkira, seeing the Baals in their village. I mean, it's that connection and the power of the arts to lift our soul and keep our communities connected.
Thank you. Beautifully put. Thank you, Ali. Amber, we want to hear from you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I think I've just got one word, and it's hope. You know, I hope we've learnt so many lessons. I hope we've realised what's important. I don't think we will necessarily, but I just hope on many levels. That's all. Thank you so much, Madhura, as well. And I've been so inspired, and I've learnt so much today. So thanks to everybody involved.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you, all of you. It was absolutely wonderful to hear from all of you and to hear your insights, your experiences. And I think I totally enjoyed the webinar, and I'm sure all the audiences did. So I will now like to close this by saying a very big thank you to British Council entire team for continuously supporting us. Thank you to all our speakers, Jonathan, Amber, Ali, and also Tajkira and Nitto Priya, who have, I think, just moved out of the Zoom. And thank you so much for your time and for such an enthusiastic engagement with the webinar and the issue. And I also would like to thank the Bangla Natak team who are working behind the scene for web support, for artist coordination, for managing the on-ground festival. As I said, that it is on ground and it is going on. What we are seeing are only a glimpse of the on-the-ground festival that's happening. So thank you all, and thank you to our audiences for being there. I would just like to end by saying that tomorrow we have another very interesting webinar on heritage and resilience. I think a lot of it we already spoke about today, but I think tomorrow is going to be a very interesting closing webinar in the context of new normal, heritage and resilience. Same time, 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. It will also include live demonstrations of Shola craft, which is very, very unique to Bengal. It's a natural fiber, and performance by a baul singer again. We can't do without music, it seems. So please join us tomorrow also if you can. And thank you so much again. Goodbye and good night.